The stagecoach lurched to a violent halt outside the dusty trading post, throwing Willa Fletcher against the wooden seat hard enough to bruise her shoulder. And she knew before the door, even opened, that her carefully constructed new life was about to crumble like everything else she had ever tried to build. "End of the line, miss," the driver called down, his voice muffled by the bandana covering his mouth against the New Mexico dust. It was August of 1878, and the heat shimmered off the red earth in waves that made the distant mountains look like they were dancing. Willa stepped down from the coach, her worn traveling dress clinging to her back with perspiration. The small settlement of Placitas spread before her, barely more than a handful of buildings clustered at the base of the Sandia Mountains. This was supposed to be her fresh start, the place where no one knew about her past, about what she had done back in Missouri. The trading post door swung open, and a weathered man with kind eyes emerged. "You must be the new schoolteacher we've been expecting." Willa's throat tightened. She opened her mouth to correct him, to explain that she was not the woman they were waiting for, that she had simply bought a ticket to anywhere that would take her far from St. Louis and the ruins of her former life. But before she could speak, a rider on a magnificent black stallion cantered into view, and the words died on her lips. The man astride the horse was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore a dusty Stetson pulled low over his brow, and when he dismounted with easy grace, Willa could see he stood well over 6 feet. He could not have been much older than 30, perhaps 32 at most. "Samuel Yates," he said, touching the brim of his hat in greeting. His voice was deep and rough, like creek water running over stones. "I own the ranch about 5 miles north of here. Heard we were getting a new teacher for the settlement. I am not actually." Willa began, but the storekeeper was already talking over her. "This here is Miss Fletcher. Just arrived from back east." Samuel's gray eyes studied her face with an intensity that made heat rise to her cheeks. She was 24 years old, though the last 2 years had aged her in ways that did not show on her skin. Her auburn hair was pinned up beneath a simple bonnet, and her green eyes reflected a wariness born from hard experience. "Welcome to Placitas, Miss Fletcher," Samuel said. "We are mighty grateful you have come all this way. The children here need proper schooling." Willa felt the familiar weight of guilt pressing down on her chest. "Sir, I really must explain. I am not qualified to teach anyone anything. There has been a mistake." Samuel's expression shifted, confusion crossing his weathered features. "But the letter said—" "I did not send any letter," Willa said softly. "I simply needed to get away from Missouri, and when I saw that the stage was heading to New Mexico territory, I bought passage. I am sorry for the confusion." The storekeeper's face fell. "But we've been waiting months for a teacher. The children are going wild without any education." "I am truly sorry," Willa repeated, her hands twisting together. She could feel her carefully maintained composure beginning to crack. "I should not have allowed you to believe something that was not true. I will catch the next stage out of town." "That would be Thursday next," the storekeeper said glumly. "Week from now." Samuel was still watching her with those penetrating gray eyes. "You are running from something," he said quietly. It was not a question. Willa stiffened. "My past is my own business, Mr. Yates." "That it is," he agreed. "But if you are going to be stranded here for a week anyway, maybe you could help us out. Even if you are not a trained teacher, I expect you can read and write well enough to give the children some lessons." "I really do not think that is a good idea," Willa protested. The last thing she needed was to be responsible for children, to have their futures depending on her when she had proven herself so utterly unreliable. "The boarding house is full up with minors," the storekeeper added. "Only place with a spare room is the old teacherage behind the church." You might as well make use of it." Before Willa could formulate another objection, Samuel said, "I will pay you for the week, fair wages. And I will make sure you get on that stage come Thursday if that is still what you want." There was something in his voice that made her look up and meet his eyes. She saw no judgment there, no demand, only a quiet offer of help from one weary soul to another. "Why would you do that?" she asked. "You do not know anything about me." "I know you are honest," Samuel replied. "You could have just kept your mouth shut and pretended to be the teacher. Instead, you told the truth even though it made things harder for you. That tells me what I need to know." Willa felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her with such simple kindness. "I made terrible mistakes back in Missouri," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am not a good person, Mr. Yates. Let me decide what you are and are not," Samuel said firmly. "Right now, what I see is a woman who needs a place to stay and some honest work, and a community that needs help with its children. Seems like we might be able to help each other." The week that followed passed in a blur of activity that left Willa little time to dwell on her troubled thoughts. The teacherage was a simple two-room cabin with a pot-bellied stove and a narrow bed, but it was clean and private. Samuel had it stocked with firewood and basic supplies before she even moved in. The children who showed up for lessons ranged from 6 to 14 years old, a ragged collection of miners' kids and ranch hands' offspring who were hungry for knowledge despite their rough exteriors. Willa found herself drawn into their earnest questions, their delight at learning new words and numbers. Samuel stopped by each afternoon after he finished his ranch work. He would sit in the back of the small schoolroom, his hat in his hands, watching as Willa guided the children through their lessons. Afterward, he would walk her back to the teacherage as the sun painted the mountains gold and crimson. "You are good with them," he said on the third evening. They were taking the long way around, past the small creek that gave Placitas its name. "They are good children," Willa replied. "They deserve someone better than me." Samuel stopped walking and turned to face her. "Why do you keep saying that? What happened in Missouri that has you so convinced you are worthless?" Willa's hands clenched at her sides. She had not spoken about it to anyone, had been running from the memories for months. But something about Samuel's steady presence, his quiet strength, made her want to unburden herself. "I was engaged to be married," she began, her voice tight, "to a man named Robert. He was a banker, well respected in St. Louis. I thought I was so fortunate that he had chosen me." Samuel waited, patient as the mountains. "He had debts," Willa continued, "gambling debts that he kept hidden. When his creditors came calling, he needed money quickly. He asked me to help him, said if I truly loved him, I would prove it by doing this one thing." "What did he ask you to do?" Samuel's voice was gentle. "He worked at his father's bank. He asked me to help him steal from the vault." The words came out in a rush now, like poison she had been holding in for too long. "He said it was not really stealing because it was his father's money and he would inherit it anyway someday. He made it sound so reasonable, so justified." "But it was not," Samuel said. "No." Willa's voice broke. "We were caught. Robert immediately blamed everything on me. He said I had seduced him into it, that I was the mastermind. His father believed him because I was just a poor girl who worked as a seamstress, and Robert was his beloved son. I spent 2 months in jail before they finally released me for lack of evidence, but by then my reputation was destroyed. No one would hire me. People crossed the street to avoid me. I had nothing left." She looked up at Samuel, expecting to see disgust or disappointment in his face. Instead, she saw a deep, steady compassion that made her throat ache. "So you ran," he said. "I used what little money I had saved to buy a ticket west. I just wanted to disappear." Willa wrapped her arms around herself. I should have told you all this before. You should not have offered me work. I am not trustworthy. Samuel reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, and gently took her hands in his. His palms were rough from ranch work, warm and solid. Willa, he said, and it was the first time he had used her given name. What you just told me is that you made one mistake because you trusted someone you loved. That does not make you untrustworthy. It makes you human. I helped try to steal money, Willa protested. You were manipulated by a coward, Samuel countered. And when you were caught, you took responsibility instead of running or making excuses. Then, when you came here and could have lied to get room and board, you told the truth even though it cost you. That is not the behavior of a bad person. Willa felt tears streaming down her cheeks. You do not understand. Everyone back home thinks I am a criminal. Good thing we are not back home then, Samuel said. Out here, people get to decide who they want to be. The past does not have to define you unless you let it. I am not worthy of this, Willa whispered. Of your kindness, of teaching these children, of any of it. Samuel stepped closer, his hand still holding hers. Let me decide what you are worthy of, he said firmly. I have been watching you all week, Willa. I have seen how patient you are with the children, how you stay late to help the ones who are struggling. I have seen how you mend torn pages in the old primers with careful stitches, how you use your own money to buy chalk when we run low. That is who you are. Not some made-up story about a crime you barely committed. You have so much faith in someone you barely know, Willa said, but she could not quite bring herself to pull her hands away from his. I know enough, Samuel replied. I know that you have a good heart and a strong spirit. I know that when life knocked you down, you got back up and kept going. I know that the children already love you and that they will be heartbroken when you leave on Thursday. Will you be heartbroken? The question slipped out before Willa could stop it. Samuel's gray eyes darkened. Yes, he said simply. I will be. The honesty in his answer stole Willa's breath. You cannot possibly mean that. We have known each other less than a week. I have known plenty of people for years and never felt about them the way I feel about you after 6 days, Samuel said. When you know, you know. What do you feel? Willa asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. Like I have been waiting for you my whole life without knowing it, Samuel said. Like the ranch house has been empty even though I live there because you were not in it. Like maybe God brought you to Placitas not by accident, but because this is where you were supposed to end up all along. Willa's breath caught. Samuel, I cannot. I am not ready to trust someone like that again. Robert destroyed me. He used my love as a weapon, and I cannot go through that again. I am not Robert, Samuel said. And I am not asking you to trust me blindly. I am asking you to stay a little longer. Miss the Thursday stage. Give me a chance to prove that not every man is a liar and a coward. Give this place a chance to be your home. The town was expecting a real teacher, Willa said weakly. The town has got a real teacher, Samuel countered. They have got you. If you want the job, it is yours. I already talked to the town council. They were impressed with what you have done this week. I do not have any credentials. Neither did the last 2 teachers we had. One was a former saloon girl, and the other was a prospector who got too old to work his claim. Both of them did fine. You will do better than fine. Willa looked into Samuel's weathered, honest face and felt something inside her chest begin to unfold, like a flower opening to the sun after a long winter. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. What if I fail? She asked. What if I let everyone down? What if you succeed? Samuel replied, what if you build a good life here? What if you let yourself be happy? I do not know if I remember how to be happy. Then let me remind you, Samuel said softly. He released one of her hands to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away the tears that still clung to her lashes. "Will you stay, Willa? Will you give Placitas a chance? Give me a chance." The sensible part of Willa's mind screamed that this was madness, that she barely knew this man, that she would only end up hurt again. But there was another part of her, a part that had been beaten down and buried but not quite destroyed, that whispered of possibilities, of second chances, of hope. "I will stay," she heard herself say, "at least for a while longer." The smile that broke across Samuel's face was like sunrise over the mountains. "That is all I ask," he said. "Just a while longer." True to his word, Samuel did not push for more than Willa was ready to give. He courted her with a patience that astonished her, showing up each evening to walk her home from the schoolhouse, bringing her small gifts that showed he was paying attention to what she liked. A book of poetry when she mentioned missing reading for pleasure. A shawl in the exact shade of green that matched her eyes. A jar of honey from his ranch when she remarked that she enjoyed it in her tea. As September gave way to October, and the aspens in the mountains turned to gold, Willa found herself settling into life in Placitas in ways she had never expected. The children thrived under her instruction, their reading skills improving week by week. The community began to accept her as one of their own, the women inviting her to quilting circles and church socials. And Samuel was there through it all, a steady presence that never wavered. He was nothing like Robert, she realized. Where Robert had been charming and glib, Samuel was quiet and thoughtful. Where Robert had made grand promises, Samuel showed his care through consistent actions. Where Robert had taken and taken, Samuel gave freely without expecting anything in return. "Tell me about your ranch," Willa said one evening as they sat on the teacherage porch watching the stars emerge. It was late October now, and the air had a crisp bite to it that promised winter was not far off. "It is not much," Samuel said. "About 500 acres that I have been building up for the past 8 years. I run cattle mostly, some horses. The house is solid, built it myself from timber I cut in the mountains. It has got a good well, a barn, corrals, everything a working ranch needs. You live there alone?" Willa asked. "Except for my ranch hands, yes. I've got 2 men who help with the cattle and horses. They bunk in the old cabin on the south pasture." Samuel paused. "It is a lonely life sometimes. I always figured I would marry someday, fill that house with a family. But the right woman never came along." "Until now?" Willa asked softly. Samuel turned to look at her. The moonlight silvered his features, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the gentleness in his eyes. "Until now," he confirmed. "Willa, I know you are still healing from what Robert did to you. I know you are not ready to make any promises. But I want you to know that when you are ready, if you are ever ready, I would be honored to make you my wife." Willa's heart stuttered. "Samuel, that is." "No pressure," he said quickly. "I am not asking you to answer. I am just letting you know where my heart stands. You can take all the time you need to figure out where yours stands." "I care about you," Willa admitted. "More than I thought I could care about anyone after what happened. But I am scared, Samuel. I am terrified of making another mistake, of trusting the wrong person again." "That is understandable," Samuel said. "But Willa, you cannot let one bad man rob you of your whole future. Robert was a coward and a liar, but that does not mean every man is. You have to decide if you are going to let what he did define the rest of your life, or if you are going to take back your power and write your own story." His words resonated through her like a bell. "How did you get so wise?" she asked. Samuel chuckled, the sound warm in the darkness. "I have made my share of mistakes. Lost my parents when I was 22 to cholera. Spent a few years drifting and feeling sorry for myself before I realized I was wasting the life they had given me. When I finally pulled myself together and started building the ranch, I promised myself I would not waste any more time on regret. Life is too short and too precious. I am sorry about your parents, Willa said. Thank you. It was a long time ago now, but I think about them every day. They were good people, hardworking and honest. They taught me that your word is your bond and that you judge a person by their actions, not their talk. He reached over and took her hand. Your actions tell me everything I need to know about who you are, Willa Fletcher. November brought the first snow to the Sandia Mountains, dusting the peaks with white that glittered in the sun. Willa had been in Placitas for 3 months now, and the rhythm of her days had become comfortingly familiar. Teaching the children filled her mornings and early afternoons. Evenings belonged to Samuel. They had fallen into an easy companionship that felt both natural and precious. Samuel taught her to ride, patiently guiding her through the basics until she could handle a gentle mare with confidence. They took long rides through the high desert, and Samuel showed her hidden springs and ancient Pueblo ruins, shared the history of the land that he loved so deeply. In turn, Willa shared pieces of herself that she had thought were lost forever. She told him about her childhood in Ohio, about her mother who had died when Willa was 12, about her father who had worked himself to death in a factory. She shared her love of books and learning, her secret dream of someday writing stories of her own. You should write them, Samuel said. They were sitting in the ranch house kitchen, where Samuel had invited her for Sunday dinner. He had cooked a surprisingly good meal of roast chicken and vegetables, and now they were lingering over coffee as the afternoon light slanted through the windows. I would not know where to begin, Willa protested. Begin with what you know, Samuel suggested. Write about coming west, write about starting over. Those are stories worth telling. Willa looked around the kitchen, taking in the sturdy table Samuel had built with his own hands, the curtains that hung limply at the windows because no woman had lived here to make the house a home. This place could be beautiful, she said. With some work. It could, Samuel agreed. It needs a woman's touch, needs someone to care about more than just function. Their eyes met across the table and Willa felt her pulse quicken. Samuel, I love you, he said simply. I have loved you since the day you stepped off that stagecoach and told the truth even though it cost you. I love your courage and your kindness and the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating on teaching the children. I love how you laugh at my terrible jokes and how you are not afraid to tell me when I am being stubborn. I love everything about you, Willa, and I will wait as long as it takes for you to believe that you deserve to be loved. Willa felt tears streaming down her face, but for once they were not tears of pain or shame. I am so afraid, she whispered. I know, Samuel said. He stood and came around the table, kneeling beside her chair so they were eye to eye. But courage is not the absence of fear, Willa. It is doing the right thing even when you are scared. You have already shown more courage than most people do in a lifetime. You can do this too. Do what? Willa asked, though she already knew. Trust yourself, Samuel said. Trust that you know the difference between a man like Robert and a man like me. Trust that what you feel is real and worth fighting for. Willa reached out and touched his face, her fingertips tracing the weathered lines around his eyes, the strong curve of his jaw. I do know the difference, she said slowly. You have shown me every day through your actions what kind of man you are. You have been patient when I was skittish, kind when I was prickly, steady when I was lost. You have given me space to heal and time to learn to trust again. And have you? Samuel asked, his voice rough with emotion. Learn to trust again. Yes, Willa said, and as the word left her lips, she realized it was true. Somewhere between that first evening and this moment, she had learned to trust again. Not blindly, not foolishly, but with eyes wide open to both the risks and the possibilities. "I trust you, Samuel Yates, and I love you too." The kiss that followed was gentle and sweet, full of promise and hope. When they finally pulled apart, Samuel was smiling. "Marry me," he said. "Not because you need a place to stay or because you think you owe me anything. Marry me because you want to build a life together. Because you can see us sitting in this kitchen 20 years from now, telling stories to our grandchildren about how we met." Grandchildren. Willa laughed through her tears. "You are getting ahead of yourself." "Am I?" Samuel challenged. "Can you not see it too?" And the remarkable thing was she could. For the first time since Robert had betrayed her, Willa could see a future that was not clouded by shame and regret. She could see herself making this house a home, raising children in the shelter of these mountains, growing old beside this good, steady man who had seen past her mistakes to the person she truly was. "Yes," she said. "I will marry you, Samuel. I will build a life with you. I will choose hope over fear and love over regret." Samuel stood and pulled her to her feet, sweeping her into an embrace that lifted her off the ground. "You have made me the happiest man in New Mexico territory," he said against her hair. "I am still scared," Willa admitted. "What if I am not a good wife? What if I disappoint you?" "Then we will work through it together," Samuel said. "That is what marriage is, Willa. Two imperfect people choosing each other every day, choosing to work through the hard times and celebrate the good times. I do not expect you to be perfect. I just expect you to be you." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Placitas, with the whole community turning out to celebrate. Willa wore a dress of cream-colored wool that the women of the town had helped her sew, and she carried a bouquet of dried wildflowers. Samuel wore his best suit and could not stop smiling. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When the minister asked if Samuel would take Willa to be his wife, his "I do" rang out clear and strong. When it was Willa's turn, she looked into Samuel's gray eyes and said, "I do," with absolute certainty. The winter that followed was the happiest of Willa's life. She continued teaching until March, when the spring thaw made the roads too muddy for the children to get to school easily. Then she turned her attention to making the ranch house a true home. She sewed curtains for every window, planted a garden in the patch of earth near the kitchen door, filled the empty rooms with warmth and life. Samuel worked the ranch with his usual dedication, but now he came home each evening to a wife who greeted him with genuine joy. Their love deepened as the months passed, growing from the tentative new feelings of their courtship into something solid and enduring. They learned each other's rhythms and quirks, had their first argument about how to handle a problem with one of the ranch hands, and discovered they could disagree without it destroying them. In August, a year after Willa had first arrived in Placitas, she realized she was pregnant. The knowledge filled her with a complex mixture of joy and terror. "What if I am not a good mother?" she asked Samuel as they lay in bed that night, his hand resting on her still flat stomach. "You will be an excellent mother," Samuel said firmly. "You have been mothering those schoolchildren all year, and they adore you." "But a baby is different," Willa protested. "A baby depends on you for everything. And our baby will have 2 parents who love it and each other," Samuel said. "That is more than a lot of children get, Willa. We will figure it out together, just like we figure everything else out." "I am not worthy of this," Willa whispered, the old doubts creeping back in. "Of you, of this life, of a child who deserves better than a mother with a criminal record." Samuel pulled her close, his arms strong and sure around her. "Let me decide what you are worthy of," he said, echoing the words he had spoken that first week. "And I say you are worthy of every good thing this life has to offer. You are worthy of love and happiness and a family of your own. You are worthy of the fresh start you have built here, Do not let the ghosts of your past rob you of your future. Willa let his words wash over her, let herself believe them in a way she had not quite been able to before. I love you, she said. I love the life we have built together. I love that we are going to have a baby. Then hold on to that, Samuel said. When the doubts come, remember this moment. Remember that you chose this, chose us. You are not that scared girl on the stagecoach anymore, Willa. You are a woman who has built a home and a community and a marriage. You are stronger than you know. Their son was born the following April, arriving on a morning when the desert was carpeted with wildflowers. The labor was long and hard, but when Samuel placed the squalling infant in Willa's arms, every moment of pain vanished in the flood of overwhelming love. He is perfect, Willa breathed, counting the tiny fingers and toes, marveling at the shock of dark hair so like his father's. What should we name him? Samuel asked, his voice thick with emotion. Willa thought for a moment. Thomas, she said. After my father, Thomas Yates. Thomas Yates, Samuel repeated, testing out the name. I like it. Welcome to the world, Thomas. The first months of motherhood were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Willa discovered reserves of strength she had not known she possessed, learning to function on little sleep and even less peace. But she also discovered a capacity for love that astonished her. The fierce protectiveness she felt for her son, the joy she found in his first smile, his first laugh, the way he fit perfectly in the curve of her arm. Samuel was an involved father from the start, walking the floor with Thomas when the baby was fussy, changing nappies without complaint, marveling over every small milestone. Watching him with their son made Willa fall in love with him all over again. By the time Thomas was 6 months old, Willa had settled into the rhythms of motherhood and was ready to take on teaching again. The town had been using a rotating system of volunteer instructors while she was on leave, but everyone was relieved when she announced she was ready to return. Samuel helped her work out a schedule that allowed her to teach in the mornings while he watched Thomas, then take over childcare in the afternoons so he could handle ranch work. It was not perfect, but it worked for their family. The years passed with surprising swiftness. Thomas grew into a sturdy toddler, then a curious little boy. When he was 3, Willa became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy felt easier, her body remembering what to do, her mind less plagued by doubts. Their daughter was born in November, a small but fierce creature with Willa's auburn hair and green eyes. They named her Mary after Samuel's mother. Our family is complete, Samuel said, holding Mary while Thomas climbed up onto the bed to peer at his new sister. She is so small, Thomas said, his voice filled with wonder. You were this small once, Willa told him. Hard to believe now, but you were. I will protect her, Thomas announced with all the seriousness a 3-year-old could muster. No one will hurt my sister. Willa felt tears prick her eyes. Her son, this beautiful boy who knew nothing of the shame and pain that had marked her past, who lived in a world where his mother was simply his mother, not a woman with a criminal history. That was the gift Samuel had given her, she realized. Not just love and a home, but the chance to be defined by who she was now rather than what she had done before. As the children grew, Willa continued to teach, finding that motherhood made her an even better educator. She understood her students' struggles more deeply now, had more patience with their mistakes. The school became a true center of the community, with Willa organizing spelling bees and recitals that brought the whole town together. Samuel's ranch prospered as well. He had a good eye for cattle and horses, and his reputation for fair dealing spread throughout New Mexico territory. By the time Thomas was 8 and Mary was 5, the Yates Ranch was one of the most successful in the region. But success never changed Samuel. He was still the same steady, honest man who had offered Willa a second chance all those years ago. He still walked her home from the schoolhouse when their schedules allowed, still brought her coffee in bed on Sunday mornings, still looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. "Do you ever regret it?" Willa asked him one evening. They were sitting on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains pink and gold. The children were inside, Thomas reading to Mary from one of his school books. "Regret what?" Samuel asked. "Marrying me. Taking on all my baggage and complications." Samuel turned to look at her, his gray eyes serious. "Willa, you are the best thing that ever happened to me, you and the children. Why would I regret that? I just wonder sometimes if you would have been happier with someone simpler. Someone without a past." "Everyone has a past," Samuel said. "The only difference is some people let their past define them and others use it to become stronger. You did the latter. You took something terrible and used it to build something beautiful. That is not baggage, Willa. That is courage." "I love you," Willa said, not for the first time but with the same depth of feeling she had felt on their wedding day. "I love you too," Samuel replied. "Always have, always will." When Thomas turned 12, he began working on the ranch alongside his father, learning the skills he would need to one day take over the family business. He was a good boy, hard-working and honest like Samuel, with a quick mind like his mother. Mary, at 9, showed a talent for drawing and could often be found sketching the mountains or the horses or anything else that caught her eye. Willa encouraged her daughter's artistic bent, ordering special drawing pencils and paper from Santa Fe. The town of Placitas had grown over the years. What had been a small settlement was now a proper town with several stores, a bank, and even a small newspaper. But it still maintained the close-knit community feel that had welcomed Willa so many years ago. Sometimes, sitting in church on Sundays with Samuel on one side and her children on the other, Willa would think back to that terrified woman who had stepped off the stagecoach with nothing but a carpetbag and a heart full of shame. She barely recognized that person now. The shame had faded, worn away by years of honest work and genuine relationships. The fear had been replaced by confidence built on a foundation of love and acceptance. The desperate need to run had transformed into a deep contentment with the life she had built. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel surprised her with a trip to Santa Fe. They left the children with friends and spent 3 days exploring the city, eating in restaurants, visiting the plaza, staying in a real hotel. It was a luxury they rarely indulged in, and Willa treasured every moment. "Thank you," she said on their last evening as they watched the sun set over the city from their hotel window. "For what?" Samuel asked. "For seeing me when I could not see myself," Willa said. "For believing in me when I had stopped believing in myself. For giving me a life I never thought I deserved." Samuel pulled her close. "You gave me just as much, Willa. You filled my empty house and my lonely heart. You gave me children and purpose and joy. We saved each other, I think." "I think you are right," Willa agreed. When New Mexico became a state in 1912, the whole town celebrated. Willa and Samuel hosted a party at their ranch, and it seemed like half the territory showed up. Thomas was 26 now, married to a sweet girl from Albuquerque and expecting his first child. Mary, at 23, was teaching at a school in Santa Fe but had come home for the celebration. "Can you believe it?" Mary said, linking her arm through Willa's as they watched the festivities. "We are part of the United States now, officially." "We always were, really," Willa said. "But yes, it is exciting to have it be official." "Are you glad you stayed?" Mary asked, "instead of leaving on that stagecoach all those years ago?" Willa looked over at Samuel, who was laughing at something Thomas had said. his hair now more silver than brown, but his smile just as warm as it had been when she first met him. She thought about the life they had built together, the love they had shared, the family they had created. "I am more than glad," Willa said. "Staying was the best decision I ever made." As the years continued to pass, Willa watched her family grow. Thomas and his wife had 3 children, giving Willa the grandchildren Samuel had predicted all those years ago. Mary eventually married a lawyer from Santa Fe and had 2 children of her own. The ranch continued to prosper under Thomas's management. He had inherited his father's way with animals and his mother's head for business. Samuel, now in his 60s, was content to step back and let his son run things, though he still helped out when he was needed. Willa finally retired from teaching when she was 55, after 33 years in the classroom. The town threw her a retirement party that brought tears to her eyes. Former students, now grown with children of their own, came to thank her for the education and guidance she had provided. "You changed my life," one young woman told her. "I was the daughter of a saloon girl. Everyone thought I would end up following in her footsteps, but you believed I could be more. You pushed me to learn to dream bigger. Now I am a nurse in Albuquerque. That is because of you." Stories like that filled the evening, each one a reminder that the life Willa had built in Placitas had mattered. She had made a difference, not just to her own family but to the entire community. In their later years, Willa and Samuel settled into a comfortable routine. They spent their mornings having coffee on the porch, their afternoons reading or receiving visits from their grandchildren, their evenings reminiscing about the decades they had shared. "You remember that first evening?" Samuel asked one night. They were in bed, tucked close together for warmth as the winter wind howled outside. "When you told me about Robert and Missouri, I remember," Willa said. "I was so sure you would turn away from me once you knew the truth." "I almost could not believe you thought so little of yourself," Samuel said, "when it was so clear to me what an extraordinary person you were." "I am not extraordinary," Willa protested, though the words held no heat. It was an old argument, one they had been having in various forms for 40 years. "You are to me," Samuel said simply. "You always have been." When Samuel died at the age of 78, peacefully in his sleep after a long and well-lived life, Willa grieved deeply, but she did not fall apart. The strength he had helped her build over 4 decades of marriage held her up through the funeral and the difficult months that followed. She stayed in the ranch house, surrounded by memories of their life together. Thomas and his family lived close by, and they checked on her daily. Her grandchildren visited often, bringing noise and laughter into the quiet house. Willa took to writing in her final years, finally pursuing the dream she had mentioned to Samuel so long ago. She wrote about coming west, about finding love when she least expected it, about the power of second chances. The stories were not published, but she did not care. She wrote them for herself and for her grandchildren, so they would know where they came from and what it took to build a life worth living. When Willa passed away at the age of 82, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, her final thoughts were of gratitude. Gratitude for the courage that had brought her west all those years ago. Gratitude for Samuel, who had seen past her shame to the woman she could become. Gratitude for the life they had built together, full of love and purpose and meaning. She was buried beside Samuel in the Placitas cemetery, beneath a simple stone that read Willa Fletcher Yates, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and teacher. But the true measure of her life was not in the words on her gravestone. It was in the lives she had touched, the children she had taught, the family she had raised, and the love she had both given and received. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, a testament to the legacy Samuel and Willa had built together. Their great-great-grandchildren would someday walk the same land, never knowing the full story of the scared young woman who had stepped off a stagecoach in 1878, thinking herself unworthy of love or happiness. But Thomas knew, and he made sure his children knew, and they told their children in turn. The story of Willa Fletcher Yates became a family legend, passed down through the generations. A story about courage and redemption, about second chances and the transformative power of love. It was a story about a woman who thought herself unworthy, and a man who helped her see that worthiness is not something bestowed by others or lost through mistakes. It is something inherent, something that cannot be taken away no matter what happens. It was a story about how the past does not have to define the future, and how sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead us to the best ones if we are brave enough to keep moving forward. But most of all, it was a love story. A story about two people who found each other against all odds and built a life that mattered. A story that proved that love, real love, is not about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It is about choosing each other every day, through good times and bad, and building something lasting from that choice. In the end, that was Willa's greatest legacy. Not the children she taught or the family she raised, important as those were. Her greatest legacy was the proof that transformation is possible, that worthiness is inherent, and that love can heal even the deepest wounds if we are brave enough to accept it. The house Samuel built still stands in Placitas, New Mexico, now carefully preserved by his descendants. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind whispers through the cottonwoods, you can almost hear the echo of their voices. A rancher telling a frightened young woman to let him decide what she is worthy of. A woman learning to believe she deserves the love being offered. Two people building a life together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of courage at a time. Their story ended as all stories must, but the love they created lives on. In the children and grandchildren who carry their blood, in the land they tended and preserved, in the community they helped build, and in the hearts of everyone who hears their tale and remembers that it is never too late for a second chance, never too late to choose love over fear, never too late to become the person you were always meant to be.